Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We are going to be doing a speed review video today. I have a ton of products here in front of me. This is all stuff that I've been trying out over the last couple of months that I've got some more definitive thoughts on. I want to share some updates with you guys, what's been working for me, what maybe hasn't been working for me so much. I've got a ton of stuff here today. A lot of eyeshadow palettes. I've got some concealers, a lot of cream bronzers and cream blushes, some brow products, including a couple of things that I've had and been using for a really long time, but I have some updated thoughts on them. We'll get into it all today. I'm going to try and keep things quick. I'm going to try my hardest not to talk too much. This seems to be a problem for me, but I'm determined today to really keep this an actual speed review. But quickly, before we get into everything, welcome if you are new here. Happy to have you here. I hope that you'll consider subscribing before you leave. Make sure those notifications are turned on so that you can be notified each time I upload a new video. And now let's get right to it. Let's start with some cream blushes. So I have these two sets of cream blushes. These here from Flower Beauty, the Gel Crush Lip and Cheeks, and then these three Dream Stick blushes from Persona. I have to be honest, guys, I love all of these. Like, I love both formulas. I'm not sure that I can pick between them. I do think the Persona ones are probably a little bit more pigmented, so you have to be a little more light-handed with these ones when you go in with your brush or however you like to apply them, with your finger, a sponge. But I do really love the shades of all three of these. I think if you were to pick three shades that would kind of cover all your bases, this is a really good set. This one is quite peachy in tone, the shade Teddy. This one is very bright and pink, the shade Bubbly. I recently raved about this shade in a video. It's so pretty and fun and different. And then the shade Kiss also has a bit of pink in it, but it's more of like a appley sort of pink. Gives you a little bit more of like a rosy glow than like a bright pop of pink kind of glow, like a fresh glow. But I am really happy with all of them. None of these have broken me out. I did have some issues with their Dream Stick bronzer breaking me out, but none of these have done that. As for the Flower Beauty ones, these have been long-time favorites of me, just these products in general. I bought these three remaining shades more recently. It's been a couple months. I think it was a couple months ago. I have the shade Blackberry Crush, Citrus Crush, and Peach Crush. I love all of these, but I do think if I had to pick one shade as my least favorite, it would have to be the Citrus Crush shade. It's a fun shade if you like orange toned blushes, but it's quite orange in tone. Let me just give this a swatch on the back of my hand. This is a type of blush that for me, it needs a very specific look. It's not the type of shade that I just reach for kind of an everyday look unless I'm really looking for an orange cheek, which generally I just am not into that type of a tone for me. If oranges are your thing, maybe you have more medium to deep skin tones, and this kind of like bright orange creamsicle kind of color tends to look better on you. This is a really pretty formula. I love the Gel Crush Cheek formula, but I think I'd pick these two shades, Peach Crush and Blackberry Crush, over that one. Peach Crush is somewhat similar to Citrus Crush, but it's not quite so orange. It has just a touch more pink in it that makes it a little bit better for my skin tone. It is the blush that I'm wearing on my cheeks today. It's lovely. I also love Blackberry Crush. It's a great one as well. I think these ones might be a little bit more hydrating than the Persona ones. I also think these ones are a little less pigmented, so you can really build up quite a bit of product in these on your brush before you go in. I think they're actually maybe even a little bit easier to work with. And I also think these ones are a little bit more user-friendly for your lips because they're not quite so pigmented as the Persona ones. Next up, we got to talk about some cream bronzers. I feel like I've given some pretty final thoughts on all three of these. I've been talking about them a lot since I tried them out last month. I love them all. I'll say that right off the bat. I think I've said that a few times. There are some differences between these. I think my favorite formula and performance-wise, if I had to pick one, would be the Charlotte Tilbury one, but the price tag on this thing is pretty hefty, and I do really love the other two as well. The Makeup by Mario Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer, I really love this one. It has a really buttery emollient texture. I mean, this is one of the creamiest of all the cream bronzers in my collection, but there's a caveat to that. Because it is so creamy, it's a little bit more also on the sheer side, so you don't get a lot of pigment out of it. You get more butteriness than pigment. So you really have to build this one up. And I find that as I do that, the areas on my cheek where I need coverage to stay, where I have some things to cover, I find this one really does lift off that coverage as I build it up and work it into my skin. So just be aware of that. If you have a lot to cover on your cheeks, you might want to go with one of these two because I think the formulas make them a little bit easier to maintain some of that coverage underneath. But that said, this one might be one of my favorite shades of the bunch. I have the light medium version. It has a pretty rosiness to it that I just love. It looks really pretty on the skin. I just find that I have to go back in and cover up the little spots that reappear after I reapply it, or just be content with them not being covered. I do want to give one final thought on the NARS one though. This is the one that I'm wearing on my cheeks today. This one reminds me, the more I've used this, and I've actually gone back to an old reliable, this is what I compare every cream bronzer to, the Milk Makeup Original Bronzer Stick. It's the large one in the shade Baked. Longtime favorite of mine. You guys have heard me talk about this for years. It's a staple in my collection, and I think these formulas and actually these colors are very, very similar to each other. I think this NARS one might be a hair lighter, darker, and more pigmented. So you have to be even more light-handed with this one than with the Milk Makeup bronzer stick, but the formulas are quite similar to each other. They're both quite creamy, but they're not quite as buttery as the Mario one or like the Playa Bento one from Kaja. I really do like this one though. So I guess my final thoughts would just be, maybe don't look to me for cream bronzer advice. It seems that almost none of them disappoint me. I tend to love them all, but I wanted to share those updates for you guys. Let's talk about this right here. This is a highlight palette from Sigma. This is their Glow Kissed highlighter palette. I think this is 6 of their permanent highlighter shades. The shades of these are really beautiful. They're very, very glittery though. So if you are sensitive to texture showing on your skin of anything that's gonna leave like a trail of glitter down your cheeks or wherever it is that you highlight, there are some glitter particles in this one. I think it's pretty. It's a pretty highlighter from a distance, but if you're sensitive to glitter, probably not the best formula. It is also a little bit on the dry side. Like the formula, these feel a little bit dry to me. They're not my favorite. I don't think they're gonna be my favorite highlighters, and they are a little bit on the pricey side, these Sigma highlighters. So I think there's others out there, drugstore or high-end, that I would probably prefer. Not bad, but not great. I have a couple updates to share with you guys on some lip liners. I have these 2 lip liners from LA Girl. They're different formulas or versions. I have the Ultimate Intense Stay Auto Liner in the shade Forever Bare, and then I have their Perfect Precision lip liner. This one's not like a twistable one, it's a sharpenable one, in the shade Flesh. This one I don't like that much. Both the color, the formula, the fact that you have to sharpen it, it's a very orangey kind of nude. Not my favorite shade, not my favorite formula. It's not quite as long wearing as the auto liners are. This one, however, initially I thought maybe was not great. I still don't think I quite like it as much as this original shade that I tried out, the shade Nonstop Nude, but it's kind of growing on me. If I really want a light toned nude lip, this is a really pretty liner. These stay in place really well, especially considering they go on so creamy initially. If you leave them to set down for a minute and even smudge them into your lips a bit, they will stay in place for a good amount of time, like nearly as long as my Charlotte Tilbury ones. So here's the shade right here. This is the one that I am wearing on my lips today. It's a much more light nude shade, has a little bit of peach, a little bit of pink in it, but if you like that lighter tone nude, it is really, really pretty. Let me just swatch this shade right here. This is my favorite shade from them. This is the shade Nonstop Nude. As you can see, it's a little bit deeper, a little bit more kind of mauve-y. But for those days where I want a lighter nude lip like what I'm wearing today, I really do like this one. I think the formula is much better than the sharpenable pencil. I've got 3 concealer updates here to share with you guys. The Revlon Colorstay Skin Awaken Concealer, the Lancome Teint Idole, and the NYX Bear With Me Serum Concealer. So there's things I like about all 3 of these concealers. Probably my favorite of the bunch, surprisingly to me, is the Lancome Teint Idole Concealer. This is just a good general purpose concealer for me. It has higher coverage, I think, than the other 2, slightly higher coverage. It wears really well on me. It reminds me a lot of the Dior concealer, which is like my very favorite concealer of all time right now, but it's a little bit more liquidy. It's not quite as thick feeling as the Dior one is. That one's a little bit rich, a little bit more kind of thick and creamy feeling. This one's a little bit more liquidy, but it gives me just as good coverage. It blends in great to the skin. It wears great under my eyes. It doesn't crease or smudge or look too crepey or too heavy. I have the shade 250, which works really well for me. The NYX Bear With Me Concealer Serum, I really like this concealer. I love the packaging, which is funny because I am not lately a big fan of pumps. Generally speaking, most of the pumps that I have, they tend to have issues. This one is a really good pump though. You can really control how much comes out of it, and that kind of surprises me, especially with the concealer. I generally just like a doe foot, but this is a really nice quality pump. The concealer itself, it's super hydrating. It has good solid medium coverage. I can probably build it up to high medium coverage, and it feels great on my skin. But what I have found as I've been wearing this more and more is later in the day, this doesn't look great under my eyes. I'm not sure why that is. I don't think it's drying. It's not even necessarily that it like settles into my fine lines. It just makes my fine lines look more pronounced somehow. It's something I've noticed several times wearing this concealer. When I look at my makeup later on in the day, I just don't feel like my under eyes look very good. And that's not something I generally notice with other concealers. As for the Revlon Colorstay Skin Awaken Concealer, this is a really good concealer. I don't think I like it quite as much as I like my Revlon Candid Concealer. As you guys know, I love that concealer, but I do think it's good. It's really good coverage. I say this has, similar to the NYX, like solid medium coverage. You can build it up to medium high coverage. I like the formula of this one. I just don't like the packaging. That probably doesn't surprise you guys. I'm always ragging on this type of packaging. Just not a fan of the plush tip. It's just really hard to control or know how much you're applying, which makes it take a little bit longer. I have a hard time, like when you squeeze, you can't tell how much is coming out. I just don't like this type of packaging. I wish this concealer was in a doe foot. I'll still use it. I think it's a good one. This one, by the way, is in the shade 30. It is the one that I'm wearing all over my skin today. I think it wears really well. Really good coverage. It's not drying. It's supposed to have caffeine and vitamin C in it, which you can feel kind of when you apply it. You can kind of feel this like tingling, slight tingling sensation, but I don't know if that necessarily does anything for me other than just kind of feel interesting when I apply it. I just so wish this had a doe foot rather than that sponge tip applicator that I'm just not really a fan of. Let's go through some brow products and then we'll get into all the eyeshadow palettes. So this one right here, this is the Hard Candy Brow Pencil. Kind of not loving this one lately. It's a little bit stiffer than I like, but not in a good way. Like, I really love the Benefit brow pencil for its stiffness, but this one, it's stiff, but it doesn't give me like I can't build up the color payoff that I can get out of the Benefit one. I also find the color of this one, which is in the shade Blonde, I believe, it goes a little bit yellow on me. It's not quite as ashy as I would like it to be. It's not a bad pencil. It's just not my favorite. I would still prefer my Ulta Beauty one over this one. Even the like e.l.f. brow pencil or even the Precision brow pencil from e.l.f. I think is a little bit better. Not bad, just not great. As for the Revlon Color Stay Semi-Permanent Brow Ink, this is the one that I'm wearing in my eyebrows today. I really like this one. It wears really well. It did say on the packaging this is supposed to wear like up to 2 days. No, actually I think it said up to 4 days. I do find that this will wear for like a couple of days. If you deliberately try not to like scrub your brows at night when you're removing your makeup, you can still see it in your brows the next day. I actually tested this out. It's not something I generally do with this product, but I do think it wears really well. I like the pen applicator. I've actually been more into this type of an applicator lately. In fact, I have a couple others here. This one from Tony Moly, the 7-Day Perfect Tattoo Eyebrow, has a brush applicator that I really love. I've been really enjoying the Stroke-A-Brow from Ardell. This one has a felt tip applicator, which I don't think works quite as good as the brush tip applicators. It doesn't quite give you that individual brush stroke effect. But that said, I do really like this. The color's really good for me. It lasts great in my brows. It's pretty easy to use once you get the hang of it. I do think there's a bit of a learning curve with products like this, but if you're looking for a good one from the drugstore, I think this one is pretty good. By the way, mine is in the shade Blonde. I want to give an update on the e.l.f. Brow Lift compared to the Anastasia Brow Freeze. I think I've even updated these before, but there's some other thoughts that I have on them that have kind of crystallized over the last couple months. I've been a huge fan of the Brow Freeze since I initially tried it out. I do think it's a little bit trickier of a product to work with, but there are some things about the e.l.f. Brow Lift that I think in some cases I almost prefer to the Brow Freeze. It's a little bit less sticky. It's a little bit easier to work with. I don't think it holds quite as well as the Brow Lift. That's kind of the caveat with this product, is the fact that it's a little bit finicky and tricky to work with. You have to be careful with how much you apply to your brows. That's also what makes it last really well and hold your brows in place for a very long time. I'm not sure the e.l.f. one is going to hold up as well as that one, but I kind of like that this one's a little bit more soft. It doesn't quite give you that like laminated to your skin kind of brow look. I want something that's going to hold my brows up right, but I don't really like them like plastered to my skin. I want them to look a little bit soft and kind of natural. This I feel like is a happy medium. Let's move into some eyeshadow palettes. I've got a lot here. Let's start with these four from Hard Candy. These are their monochromatic or monochrome shadow quads. I was pretty disappointed in most of these with the exception of this one right here. This one is in the Bare version. This is a really good one. I like the formulas in this one. I'm actually going to save this for a dupe video. This reminds me a lot of a higher end palette that's very dear to me. These three didn't work quite as well for me. This is the Buzz version. This is the Dope version. This is the Make That Purr version. I didn't love the colors of these. I found the shimmers to be not quite as easy to work with. The mattes were a little bit less pigmented than I liked, kind of like stuck in some places. I found the deeper shades were kind of hard to build up some intensity with. They just weren't the best quality eyeshadows that I've tried. I also have these two eyeshadow palettes that I tried out from Sigma last month. The Cinderella palette, this one right here, and the Ambience palette, which is this one right here, a much more neutral one. Color story wise, these are both really nice if you're into color. This obviously is a very colorful palette. I do like the formulas of these. I think the Sigma Shimmer formula, it's not my favorite. Like when I first used this and touched this, it's a little bit more of a dry shimmer formula. All the shimmers tend to have a bit of glitter in them, which I'm not opposed to, but I generally like my more glittery formulas to be kind of creamy. I do think that you need an eyeshadow primer with these because you will get a little bit of fallout. The mattes are all really nice and blendable, very pigmented, easy to work with. I still am just kind of on the fence with the shimmers in these. I like them. I'm liking them more as I'm using them more, but I think I was expecting a little bit, I don't know. They just feel very dry. They are good. They're pretty on the eyes. If I was to hold these up to some of my favorite eyeshadow formulas out there though. Not sure I love them quite as much as some of the other ones that I've tried, which would include Sydney Grace. Let's just breeze through some of these Sydney Grace palettes. I feel like I've kind of updated you on some of these palettes more recently, but I do have a couple new ones that I've tried out and a couple other updates to share. So let's just go through them all real quick. This one right here is the California Coast palette light version. This came out during their sale last month. Beautiful palette if you like kind of berry mauve tones. Not a lot of variety in this palette. There is a bit of overlap in some of these shades, but it's a good palette if you like these type of tones and you're looking for a palette that you can kind of just dip into about anything and get a pretty look. This is one of those palettes in the Sydney Grace formula that I love. This is the Mountain Trail palette from them, a green toned palette. This palette is very pretty, very fall inspired. I'm excited to use this one in the fall, but as I've used it more over the last month or so, I find that this is missing a shade. I wish this had one shade lighter than like this bronze right here. I just find all these mid-tone shades don't quite give me a complete look. If you've watched me for a while, you'll know that I love something a little bit lighter on my inner lid or inner corner. It helps to open up my small eyes, and when I don't have that, I just find that it closes off my eyes and doesn't look that flattering on me. So I feel like I'm missing a shade in here, but that's my only criticism. Everything else in here is very pretty. If you like kind of greens that walk that line between like an army green, kind of like a khaki neutral green, this is a really pretty one. This one right here is one that I picked up myself during their sale. This is the Where the Wild Things Grow palette. Very pretty color story. It's actually quite colorful though. I don't know that looking at this initially, I mean, it doesn't look neutral, but it looks like there's a lot of neutrals in here, but I find that a lot of the combinations come out more colorful than I was anticipating they would. This green right here, which I love these types of greens, I do find has a lot more kind of sea foam like blue green in it. It's more of a colorful green than I initially thought it would be. I do think it's still really pretty, but anytime I use this palette for a look, I find my eyes are a lot more colorful than I was expecting them to be. So that's just something to be aware of. I feel like I've given a pretty good update on the Tiny Marvels palette. Fantastic one. This one actually is almost giving my Enduring Love palette a run for its money. That's my favorite, one of my all-time favorite palettes. It is from Sydney Grace. This is such a fun one if you like to dabble in a bit of color, but you like plenty of neutrals. Fantastic formulas, a lot of different options and shades in here for some interesting looks that still are pretty neutral. Absolutely recommend this for those that like to be a lot more creative with their eye makeup. And last from Sydney Grace, gotta mention the Coffee Talk palette. This is another one that I just ordered during their sale, and I am in love with this palette. It is such a beautiful palette if you like cooler toned neutrals. I mentioned this specific shade in a recent video. Look at this, you guys. It is such a beautiful bronze that's not necessarily warm or cool. It's just this beautiful kind of like lighter bronzy gold that has a bit of a coolness to it. This shade is kind of like a chameleon. If you combine it with warmer tones, it's going to bring out the warmth in it, but if you combine it with cooler tones, it'll take on those cooler kind of silvery tones. It's just a good shade that would go with just about anything. It's beautiful. If you like these very metallic kind of lid shades, which you guys know that I do, it's amazing. Beautiful little palette. I do just want to say this though, if you happen to own the That's Taupe palette from ColourPop, there's a lot of crossover between these two palettes. The formulas aren't exactly the same, but the color stories are very, very similar. So if you do have the That's Taupe, or I would even say if you have the Natasha Denona Glam palette, maybe you could pass up on the Coffee Talk. You might already own these shades inside your collection. Last up in my speed review is this eyeshadow palette from NARS. This is the NARS Summer Unrated palette. I mentioned in the video where I tried this out, I kind of was slightly underwhelmed with this palette. I think I had a bit of buyer's remorse because this palette was very, very pricey, as NARS palettes always are. This was my first try at a NARS eyeshadow palette, and initially I liked it. I just kind of felt like the color story was maybe a little bit blah. Then I got to hearing a lot of people rave about this thing. I looked at the reviews online. This thing has had fantastic reviews on the Sephora website. So I decided to give it another chance and use it a little bit more. The more that I have used this, and I have been reaching for it quite a bit, it's been in my Shop My Stash for the last couple months, it is definitely growing on me. It is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. I have some of the more berry tones. So basically today I just went in with these two shades right here. I have a little bit of this kind of purple satin shade in my outer corner, a tiny bit of this dark brown on my lash line, and then this beautiful shade. This is probably my favorite shade in the palette, this kind of like purpley berry tone right there. Oh, it's so pretty. Purpley pink. Have that all over my lid, and it is a beautiful look. Every look that I've created with this has been very beautiful. The shadows perform really well. They're very impressively good quality. These are the type of shades that are perfectly pigmented and that you can build them up, but it doesn't take too long to build them up, but they're also not so pigmented that you have to spend time blending them out. They're just very well done. The mattes are easy to blend. They don't go muddy. Like, you can get some really good dimension out of them very quickly. Fantastic quality. The more I use it, the more I recognize it. Color story is still like not the most exciting to me, but it is very, very pretty and the quality is definitely there. And I think that is everything. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. If you guys have seen me try something out recently that I didn't mention in this video today, please let me know down in the comments below. Sometimes there are some things that slip through the cracks. These were just my updated thoughts on some of the makeup that I have been testing out lately. As always, I would love to hear from you guys. If you guys have any thoughts on some of this stuff, especially if it differs from my own, let us know down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for stopping by. I hope you guys are doing well. One last reminder, if you are not yet subscribed, make sure you do that before you leave, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye. Shout out to the new artwork in the background, courtesy of my son, Ethan. I'm gonna link his YouTube channel right here for you guys. If you have people in your life that are into sketching or art or Marvel characters, if I look a little bit robotic today, that's why I can't like turn my neck all the way to the side. I lift a 5-pound weight and it knocks my back out or kinks my neck. Is it kink in your neck or crick in your neck? It's kink, right?